Hello and welcome to the second episode of Unearthing with Sue Millington and myself, Lavinia Dowling. Sue works very, very hard as our research assistant, and I am the director and founder of the M-Word Emotional Problem Solving. And last week was our very first programme. We talked very much about school refusal. And this week, well, we've got a really exciting programme for you. We've had to chuck things out because we just won't have time to have it all. But I'm going to hand you over to Sue because Sue's got the layout of our programme today. Sue, what have you got for us today?
So thank you. Yes, I've been completely going down the rabbit hole that is PDA, and I'm sure quite a few of you out there have heard of PDA because it has become a bit of a buzz word in the autism world. So yes, we're going to explore everything that is pathological demand avoidance.
So, pathological demand avoidance, we were just in the run-up to the programme starting soon, was getting a little carried away with herself, thinking of other alternative versions, which we might tempt you with towards the end. But for now, what tell us a bit more about this PDA. What is it exactly?
Yeah, so it was a phrase or a name given for a subtype of autism, and it was coined by the pioneering lady Elizabeth Newson. She is a psychologist, and she worked and devoted most of her life to autism and helping support families. She founded a school for young people with autism, and she became an advisor of that school. She set up an early years diagnostic centre. She worked all her life with families, and in 1994, she founded the Elizabeth Newson Centre, which is still in existence today in the Midlands in Nottingham, I think. And this was set up to help diagnose neurodevelopmental conditions, primarily autism. And she is the person who established pathological demand avoidance as a thing. So it's thanks to her. And this was all the way back in the 80s, believe it or not. I found this quite surprising when I first, started to research it, because it seemed such a new thing to me, and I started to research it for personal reasons because my own son seemed to have these autistic traits, if you like, that weren't quite fitting what I knew myself of autism. And something wasn't quite right. And I thought, this is a bit strange. And so I started to do my own research and found all about PDA. And the last couple of years, there has been an increasing groundswell, especially on social media, about it, set up by parents and bloggers. So yes, there's now a growing recognition of PDA, but it was all started by Elizabeth Newson, and her work was so pioneering that it couldn't go under the carpet. And Phil Christie is still today a very active advocate for PDA and for training professionals for PDA and helping support families like Elizabeth did. So he's picked up the baton of Elizabeth Newson, and he helps carry on her work. It's very important to him, and he has written lots of books and done all sorts of things to try and get PDA out there into the wider world, including starting conferences that are annual, I think, and annual conferences, PDA conferences, trying to get like-minded professionals, certainly psychologists, social workers, all together to understand it better. Yeah. Phil Christie, he has really pushed for research in this area, and he has worked closely with a lady called Ruth Fidler, who is an education consultant, and I purchased their book a couple of years ago now, The Collaborative Approaches to Learning for Pupils with PDA, and I found it an absolute mine of information. You know, it's really helped me. I've highlighted it left, right and centre and underlined all sorts of bits. And it's not just because I was a teacher, although it is aimed at helping teachers to support children with a PDA profile. But yes, he has established healthy discussions, and the first peer review paper on PDA was quite a long time ago now, in 2003, and he has highlighted that it took an awful long time for autism to become better understood, from when it was first coined as a thing in 1943, and we're still to this day obviously learning, and it's still evolving, just like PDA, and PDA is just one aspect of it. There was a milestone moment that Phil Christie shared at a conference back in 2019, that the distinctive clinical and educational needs of children with PDA became part of the guidelines for good practice and national autism standards, and that was in 2012. So this was a real achievement, that, you know, it was properly recognised in that guidance. And in 2014, he established the PDA Society, and they have advocated for the use of extreme demand avoidance questionnaire to help diagnose. It's part of the process of helping diagnose. And another thing that he has continued to loudly advocate for is the inclusion of parents as a real vital part of the assessment process, because obviously the parents are those people who are having to, you know, navigate the PDA world if they have a child with this profile.
Yeah.
And there has been a huge amount of interest from such parents, you know, going onto the social media world and sharing their experiences. And that's why I think today, if somebody mentions, have you heard of PDA? You know, we've heard of it, but do we necessarily understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating. And I was reading as well that it just seems very bizarre, does it not, that we're talking about a 50-year period with autism being recognised but not actually dealt with in a more formalised way until really only the last 20 years, which is, it doesn't compute, does it? It doesn't make any sense. And also the PDA screening form, in some respects, is the only thing that will give us a clue about behaviour that we can use as a diagnostic tool, which again is quite staggering, isn't it? Nothing seems to have come up behind it, kind of, you know, make it more finite. And I know we're talking about lots of things going on, so, you know, I'll try not to detract, but we'll come back to that a bit later on in the programme. Okay, so what other gossip then?
So moving on, the word pathological, that is obviously part of the title for PDA, has caused great debate over the years, because it is a medical term. It's referring to pathology, which is used in the medical world a lot. And pathology has the association with disease. So when I looked up the term, such words are attributed to it as obsessive, chronic, unreasonable, deviant, habitual. So of relating to or manifesting behavior that is maladaptive. So quite a list of very negative sounding words.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people in the autism world, in the autism community, the active advocates in the autism community, that see that it is a negative and unhelpful word. And they have, refused to, those that call themselves PDAers, as they like to be called, they don't like the pathologizing of it for that reason, because it's, implying that there's something seriously wrong. I mean, of course, the resulting behavior of the demand avoidance, yes, that is what is the commonality, is the need, the absolute basic need to avoid demands.
I find it interesting in that if you were thinking about, say, for example, screening autism, they use such word as deviant in the same way that they do with the actual EDAQ scoring. Again, that word is suggested. So, but to me, that word almost sounds quite old-fashioned, in that we wouldn't say, "Are you being deviant?" We would say, in this day and age, "Are you being naughty? Are you being defiant?" So it's a really interesting sort of situation to kind of think about the word of being pathological associated with deviant. Another word that I found as well, thinking about pathological, was crippling, and I thought that was quite interesting, but also maladaptive. And that's an interesting connotation again, isn't it? Because, are you manipulating a situation, making it a negative coping mechanism as if it was your own choosing? And it's a bit, that's going the wrong way, isn't it? We need to think of a different way. So are you voting then for the pervasive drive for autonomy rather than the pathological demand avoidance, or are you going for one of your own that you were designing before the program?
No, I mean, I certainly prefer the latter one, the pervasive drive for autonomy, because in my experience as a mum of somebody with this profile, it is all about his need for freedom of choice. He often throws that at me, I want to make the choice. It's my choice. You're forcing me. So it's interesting that, I'm often complying to his way. He sort of ends up being the decider of things, as in, are we leaving the house today to go for a walk? And so it is certainly pervasive. I mean, pervasive just means all encompassing, doesn't it? It's everything. It's total, absolute. And the drive certainly I get, because that is the force of nature of the anxiety, which is at the core of it. And every parent who shares, like me, the experience of PDA, it is about the anxiety forcing through these demands being avoided. you know, the absolute need to not do things if they're being told to do it, which is completely the opposite of what it is to be a child, and you're the adult, you know, you're the grown up. That's the traditional way of parenting, isn't it? And so, the same with autonomy, in that, you know, when you're a young person, when you're a child, there is this need for conformity. You know, my rules are the house rules as a parent. You know, that's what most people, I'm sure, of my generation would say, that as a parent, you're the role model, you make all the decisions, you know, the family goes with that, and between you as parents, you know, you're in control, you're in command. But the autonomy bit of PDA is an absolute barrier to that. You know, it really is. It's like some sort of just like a switch almost, you know, that invisible switch that happens in the brain when they feel under threat. You know, it's a response. And moving on to the threat situation, I found a very interesting infographic on the PDA website, PDA Society website. And there's a nice little video, quite a brief video, that explains a lot. And I particularly like this part of it, which is the stress response triangle. And so it's an inverted triangle. And at the bottom of it, the bigger space is the section that's called calm. And of course, when we're calm, everything's okay in the world. And as you go up the triangle to the point, there is a scale, an escalating scale of distress and anxiety. So the calm turns into distraction, or excuses and procrastination. So when your child, young person, starts to make excuses or to procrastinate, then perhaps you know that there's a slight change in that homeostasis, in that, you know, calm equilibrium. From there, it moves into withdrawal, and there can be a reduction of conversation. You know, that's possibly when situational mutism happens. They become physically incapacitated, perhaps, you know, might start saying that they're feeling ill, that they've got pain. That's a common thing for me. And, you know, my son often would say, in terms of going to school, I don't think I can go to school, I'm not well. And if I would ask, you know, him, what is it that's making you feel ill? Oh, I've got a pain in my legs, or I can't seem to stand up and walk properly, you know, things like that. I'd be looking at him thinking, okay, what's going on here? And there could also be, you know, I feel sick, I have a headache. So that's going up a notch. Then it becomes the point of taking control, or being compliant. So it's that fawn response of, you know, I'll just keep my head down, especially in school, if perhaps they're not feeling very safe. You know, you can go one of two ways, I suppose, in a classroom. If you're feeling that stress rising, you could disrupt and do anything but what is being asked of you by, you know, showing extreme behavior, you know, perhaps an outburst, or you can just shut down. And this then comes to the crucial point at the top of the triangle, which is then when panic sets in, and the young person will be in total fight, flight, flee response. This is when they will be showing signs of severe distress, and or self-harm can happen at this point. So that's the red zone, the very tip of the triangle. So on the website, the PDA Society, it does say that meltdowns in PDA are best understood as being like panic attacks. And that's certainly my experience of it as a parent observing. That stress response is like a panic attack.
Mm. This was quite interesting because when we were talking, obviously last week and this week before the programme, what we found was that the PDA Society weren't really talking about anxiety, and yet when we looked at that one phrase, that was the nearest we ever got to them understanding and relating it to anxiety. And I find that quite interesting because obviously Professor Newson, when she set out PDA, was thinking about very much, she worded it is about anxiety. This is an extra layer of really chronic anxiety, not just a little bit, not just a flit of, it's there 1 minute and then it's gone the next. It was that this is long term, very much so, that has been escalating, and the child's mental health deteriorating to such a point that all we're seeing is high levels of anxiety. And yet the PDA Society seemed to kind of steer away of even mentioning that, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know if you have a viewpoint on that or not.
Yeah, certainly. It's like a cycle, in my opinion, the anxiety cycle, whereby there is a trigger, there is a stressor, and the stressor could be anything. Yeah, it could be something external in the environment, and it could be something internal, or both. So the person is in that stress response as a result, and it then obviously causes such extreme distress that when that peak is hit, and then there's the calm afterwards, the ease, then there's usual exhaustion, absolute fatigue, and that can lead to low mood, because then there's guilt and shame for what's just happened. If there's been a physical outburst, especially, our children can feel very fragile in the aftermath, because it has such a horrible, overwhelming feeling that they really haven't got control over. And so, terrible things can happen in that time, which causes real guilt and shame will build up if it's not properly talked through. And it becomes this toxic stress at that point, if it's not really acknowledged, if there isn't communication about, what caused that severe anxiety in the first place, what is underlying it, then it just builds up and becomes really physically difficult for that young person, as well as mentally, because it's so long term in their minds. And it becomes then also the anticipation of anxiety. So the anticipation is like this horrendous sort of overwhelming build-up before an event. Say leaving the house to go to school, the anxiety will be increasing sometimes even the night before, and so they've not slept, as well as they would have liked, as well as you would have liked. Then of course they're tired. Then of course there's demands in the morning of, come on, let's get your breakfast, let's pack your bag, get dressed, all those things. And it becomes this cycle, this daily, hourly cycle of anxiety. And that is absolutely what's at the heart of it.
I suppose thinking about this perspective of the PDA Society are not addressing it as anxiety, although they're addressing it in lots of different ways. If we're not labeling it as anxiety, you can see where the schools come in and say, we need support with young people refusing to go to school. therefore we need CAMHS involvement. But CAMHS will turn around and say, no, this is something that you as a school have caused, therefore this is your obligation. Now, when we've got somebody with PDA, and we're going to hear a bit more about research, the data that we've pulled from the M word, but when you think about how many young people experiencing PDA and school refusal, it's an interesting combo where you come to the PDA Society and they're not really talking about anxiety, they're talking about stressors, and they're talking about other things that are causing the stressors, but they're still not affiliating themselves formally as this is all about anxiety. And I really am intrigued, given how many people we know, how many young people we know, as well as adults, are experiencing chronic anxiety where they fell foul of the school system and have not been able to go. And so you kind of, clearly we might have to have a guest from the PDA Society going down the line to kind of say, this is a really interesting viewpoint. Why is it we haven't associated it so heavily with anxiety rather than focusing on the stressors? It's an interesting debate, isn't it? But I'm taking up your time. Who have you got next that you want us to kind of consider?
Yeah, so there are a hardcore group of professionals in the psychology world who are flying the banner for PDAs. They are not totally alone, even though they might think it. And her name is Dr. Judy Eaton. And she has her own clinical practice. She's a clinical psychologist, and her practice is called Help for Psychology. And she was somebody I discovered really early on when, you know, the alarm bells are ringing in my head. What's going on for my child? What can I do? I need to know more, because, you know, the way my brain works is knowledge is power.
Yeah.
So I start exploring on the internet. And so I discovered her work, and she's done some really key research to still push. Sorry, I need a drink of water. I've just got a frog in my throat. Oh, a little frog in my throat then, sorry. For continuing understanding, growing understanding of PDA.
Yeah.
And she's done a couple of papers recently that haven't yet been able to be published on her website, but they're coming up anyway. An exploration of the PDA profile in children referred for autism diagnosis. And she did a survey, a study of children in her practice, 350 approximately children between the years 2015 and 17. And studying these children has led to her publishing a paper with Kylie Weaver, or possibly a couple of papers actually, and it's going to be considered as part of good autism practice journals that professionals can use. And what she has commented on is that there is still, sadly, as we know with autism, a huge lack of understanding, and certainly with the complex presentations, which is in inverted commas, and that these children can come to the clinic with suspected autism and have atypical autism presentations. And the parents of these children often, again, sadly, have narratives of fabricated illness being thrown at them, or poor parenting, and they are told that there's potential attachment difficulties as well, so possible attachment disorder, or oppositional defiance disorder is often sort of linked to it as well. And she has had clients for a long time now and has a growing reputation of helping people with the PDA profile. And she has been in touch with teens and young people in their early 20s who have talked of the time when they were children of feeling really misunderstood, that nobody truly got them, especially at school. And that they're angry about that, really angry about that. And so she's tried to observe children who met the criteria for autism and observe these children doing the ADOS process, which is the standard process that pediatricians use to decide if autism is a thing. And also comparing to children in a control group to children who were adopted and have attachment difficulties or experience of trauma, developmental trauma, because these are often compared to the PDA profile presentation. She looked at the statistics, and there are significant differences, but it's still not absolutely conclusive. And they found that there is the same common themes that Elizabeth Newson identified all those years ago, such as fantasizing, difficulties with peer relationships, language delay, harassment of others, which can be seen as part of obsessing about others, that there's often like a real interest in particular people, whether they're real people or fictional characters from television or books, and that there can be elaborate excuses and sabotaging in their relationships with people. And there are new themes emerging of ineffectiveness of rewards and ineffectiveness of consequences. And extreme aggression seems to be becoming more likely. And underlying a lot of her study is the existing theme of superficial sociability. So that means that on the surface, to teachers, for example, they could be seen to be having relationships with peers, and that they're part of a group, for example. So, you know, a teacher might observe this person on the playground, and they're with their friends, but underlying it is this confusion, internal confusion as to how to be, and the stress of socializing in itself as well. And that this can then result in sometimes shocking behavior, because, you know, the child especially might reach a point of real stress and perhaps not feel, you know, properly connected, and maybe even stigmatized. And so that can lead to all sorts of problems in terms of actual relationships with their peers. And there has been this common theme as well of using role play.
I think as well, with not only the role play, but also when you're thinking about the gaming, where you can do that role play, can't you? You know, pretending to be somebody else, something else, is also a very common theme.
Yes, because my son doesn't tick that box, if you want to call it a tick box exercise, which I always disagree about anyway. But yes, he doesn't role play. However, he absolutely loves the control that gaming brings. You know, his avatar is fantastic, and you know, and he does have real intense periods with particular games where the avatar is him. You know, he is the avatar, and he just loves the fact that he can completely control this avatar, of course. And this avatar does what he says, because of course he's you know, he's controlling controlling it completely. So there is that element to gaming, certainly, the fantasy element.
I was reading another piece of research that is actually quite recent. It was done this year, and it was a trial control run by Mitchell et al. In 2021 in the spring. And what they were saying that was, if we have the failure to recognize or respond effectively when an autistic child is experiencing anxiety, discomfort, or distress, this may lead to the child feeling misunderstood and alone. And then to alleviate their distress, the child then engages in behaviors perceived by others as socially inappropriate or disruptive, resulting in negative social consequences or sanctions. And that's quite powerful stuff, isn't it? Because if you think about gaming, when a parent is relaying back to the school, you know, they spend a lot of time gaming. Of course, the advisories given from the school are then, you know, remove all, you know, have a sanction in place where these are removed, which is actually quite distressing, isn't it, for all round. But most importantly, the point they raised was that accumulation of such experience over time leads in turn to increased use of problematic strategies. And I wondered what you thought about that, given what we've been talking about with all of these difficulties.
Yes, I mean, problematic strategies, certainly. I mean, the complete avoidance of demands is very problematic, let's face it. And you know, you can't completely remove yourself from reality, no matter how much you will be driven to do that, because life carries on. And I think, you know, there is this great need to escape sometimes, isn't there, when anxiety is high. It's that ground swallow me up moment, you know, where you feel all eyes are on you, and it's painful, you know, it's really, really painful, especially if it happens, you know, to the point of panic, and you're in school, or you're not home, you're not in your safety environment. And of course, we're going to reach for things that perhaps are not thought through, because our thinking brain is offline. You know, there's no proper process to decision making, and you know, you just act out whatever way is your default. You know, your intrinsic memory system kicks in, and you will have no control over what you do. You know, that's why any sort of distressed behavior should not be seen as misbehavior. It is the opposite of misbehavior, because it's what is completely intrinsic to that person in that moment.
Absolutely.
And it is just understanding that as an observer, you know, certainly for teachers, instead of immediately sanctioning, or to think, right, okay, let's remove this young person, they need to go to another room for safety, perhaps, and then they're questioned, you know, why did you do that? Then of course that's just going to cause more stress, when that person probably just needs calm, quiet space, time, to regulate again, to draw breath, and then have the conversation, but only when there's calm. And of course there's no time for that in school, for example, you know, because you're missing your lesson. You might face having the sanction of, well, because you've disrupted this lesson and you've done no learning, then you have to stay in at break. And the consequences, of course, lead to more anxiety, because then you think, okay, I'm not going to get a break. And shutdown can happen at that point, I guess. But it is a case of reframing for the professionals, I think. When there is extreme behavior, and that can be the opposite, that can be withdrawal and total shutdown as well, where, you know, you just can't seem to get through to somebody. They might be in freeze. That you're thinking, what is causing this? What is underlying this? And to have inquiry in your own head, you know, what is this showing me? What is this young person trying to tell me by their actions? Because they might not have, well, probably won't have the words, you know.
Yes. So going on to the next bit then, that you had some ideas about, I love this word, ordinariness. What did you come up with this?
So, yeah, the ordinariness of demands, the ordinariness of life. You know, let's face it, most of us have a pretty ordinary life. And I think what is a commonality in the PDA world, if you like, is that there is demand avoidance with any task that can be deemed ordinary. So even just brushing your teeth or putting your socks and shoes on ready to go out, it can be so mundane a thing that, you know, to an adult, to a grown-up, it causes real confusion, you know, when it first starts to happen. And you could see it as, you know, being disruptive to the normal flow of things. You know, you're trying to get to work, you're trying to get the kids to school, you're trying to get out the house, when actually it's the anxiety completely overriding again, completely overriding the thinking part of the brain, and it becomes a refusal. You know, there's that word again, a refusal, as in no, you know, is the response, no. And it can just be that, you know, a very clear no. Very young children are you know, saying no. And it's the can't do it, you know, I can't do it, I can't do this now. And if you think about at school, you know, from the moment your child goes to school, there is a whole raft of demands, because there's the need to comply. Straight away they're told to do things, so the control is in the adult, you know, in the adult's hands. So it is incredibly demanding, and we know that that is the normal way of things in our education system, in mainstream schools. So the bloggers that I've found have all shared their experiences, and that's why, you know, a lot of them have turned to blogging, because it is incredibly distressing when you're having total disruption to your normal ordinary life. You know, it is like ordinary life just can't happen anymore. That, you know, simple tasks aren't simple, and it does make you stop and question. And some of these bloggers, like Steph's two girls, she's got a daughter with a PDA profile. She does a lot of work to help network families with PDA. She's talked at length about it, her own personal experiences being a mum to her daughter, and PDA parenting. That's another lady who has, you know, formed a big network of support as well. And just looking at the posts briefly, you know, you can just see on any one day, there's lots of people on there saying, you know, it is frustrating. And then, of course, you get cross, you know, because you're trying to insist, you're trying to push your child to do whatever is needed to be done, and it's not happening. And then, of course, your authority is questioned, and that can lead to all sorts of shenanigans in the household. You know, maybe your partner thinks, you know, the authoritative way is the best way, and right, okay, I'm going to assert myself even more if you're going to not do these things that you're told to do. And it is, yeah, it is.
It becomes a battle of wills then, doesn't it?
Yes, it
does.
Yeah,
very much.
Yeah, headlock. Yeah.
Okay, so is this my time to talk about the TMW audit?
I think so.
Oh, right. Okay, well, I had a very intriguing time over the last week in the few minutes that I could give to this. And what really struck me very, very, very quickly was it wasn't just boys, it was girls and boys. So, you know, whereas when we first started out with autism, looking at very much the Asperger's end, and it was only boys. Now, of course, we're very aware that it's boys and girls, but it's not just a higher proportion over the other. It's throughout. My youngest client to date has been 2017. We did nearly have a 3-year-old, which made it really interesting. But certainly it goes right up to 2001, or as far back as 2001 rather. But we also have adults that come in who come for screening as well. So I have only stuck with the young people. When we're doing an initial screening, we look at low mood, generalized anxiety, and anger. And again, they are generally very high results, and the choice can be low, moderate, or high. And without doubt, there is an awful lot of high all over the place. And invariably, what you find is there is no one child that doesn't have a high in their makeup, whether it be low mood, or whether it be generalized anxiety, or whether it be anger, which is masking either low mood and or anxiety. So I thought that was really interesting. Perhaps what's even more incredulous is that an awful lot of what I would say are complex cases come to me, bearing in mind that I trot up and down the country every day through my Zoom machine. What I find is that there is no one specific area. It's not whether it's just primary school or secondary school. It is very much across the country, across the board. And quite often I have clients who will come to me with a formal diagnosis of 1, but invariably when we do the initial screening, we realise that things have been missed out. And we know that because the resources are tight, the budgets are tight, particularly with statutory agencies. So, of course, they're not going to be thinking about, yes, we're going to screen for everybody. They're going to, of course, be only thinking about, well, we've got enough money, you can have 1, not the other, which is fine, fair enough. But when I'm doing the screening, it's very much about saying, what are the difficulties? Because if we think about a young person who's struggling at school, if nobody knows the full content or the full extent of what are the difficulties, if you have a diagnosis, whether it's private or CAMS or pediatrics, of just 1, you need to know what else is encompassing it as to explaining why we might have a young person with PDA. Now, the real gossip of all of this, of course, is the fact that actually what we have is that invariably, if you have a combination of 2, there's a really high chance you're going to have a minimum of emerging traits of PDA. And that brings into another interesting debate, and I'm sure we will come back to that some for today, just thinking about, you know, the fact that they're either emerging, so they're definitely over a substantial score, but not enough to warrant a full diagnosis. But nevertheless, if we make people aware that there are times, quite often, when a young person will refuse or not acknowledge or, you know, defer, it does give some interesting perspective to why their anxiety is brewing. One of the things that is a definite, and it really is a definite, is when they've got a triple combination of difficulties. Invariably, what you find with the exploration through the RCAD, so that's looking at 6 different types of anxieties. If you've got a triple combination where they've got autistic traits, ADHD traits, and PDA, invariably what you find is the front 2 runners are social phobia and separation anxiety. And I'll talk about that in a second, but just thinking about that, those young people invariably do not go to school. So when we're talking about 120 people that I've been looking at over the last few days, do you have a figure in mind out of that 120 that are actually PDA and not attending school? Any ideas?
I'd say at least 50% of that.
50%? It's a bit more shocking than that.
Really?
Yeah. Really, really quite shocking. It's over 90%.
Wow.
90%. That's staggering, isn't it? So going back to the thinking about the social phobia or the separation anxiety, invariably what we have then is this situation where young people obviously need to think about, well, how do I get an education? You know, because if school is such a barrier, how do I get this education? And what I found over the last few weeks, and it's only over the last 4 weeks, there's been a definite demand from through the M word for people to have us help them with their EHCPs, applying for EOTUS. And that again is interesting. And I don't know whether it's because it's the new academic term, but we are quite late into the new academic year when you think about it. So I'm just wondering, you know, there's a question mark there. And again, when we're thinking about helping teachers understand, what we clearly see through this audit is this isn't about being defiant. This isn't about being maladaptive. This is all about anxiety, completely all about anxiety. And I found just doing this audit, and I haven't done all our clients, so I will continue to do this over a period of time, but it is interesting when it's over 90%.
Absolutely. And also why there are now local authorities in education scrabbling, well, maybe that's the wrong word, but that's how I see it, scrabbling to get together these policies that are called emotionally based school avoidance, because there's so much of it happening, and that they have to actually now put it through policy. And certainly when my son was younger and school avoiding became a thing, it was not in existence here, and I had to hear it from somebody else, you know, oh, look at this other county, they've got a policy and it's called this. And that, because up to that point I hadn't even heard of emotional based school avoidance. I didn't know it was a thing. Just like with the PDA, you know, I didn't know it was a thing. And yes, it's a growing development in school policy to have this push through so that teachers are trained to deal with it. Because
now, this is an interesting development though, isn't it? Because we've had more recently, in the last year alone, we've had social and mental health schools, have we not? And there aren't many of them. I think there was something like 7 across England, but they also are very au fait, are they not, supposed to be with mental health. That's that's in the label, but correct me if I'm wrong, they're not nurses, they are teachers again, aren't they? Teachers and TAs. And what do they implement as an offering for those pupils who go there, or supposedly people who have autism but also have PDA? What do they offer? They offer sanctions, boundaries.
A lot of the posts that I see on the PDA bloggers' websites or Facebook groups, sorry, are that, you know, time and time again, children with autism diagnosis, whether PDA or not, are sanctioned regularly. Yeah, it's just, it is.
So that would go against everything that Professor Newson was talking about, in that if we don't recognise the anxiety and we're not supporting them, then how do they cope? They're not going to cope, you know. So yet again, a bit like last week when we think about school refusal, yet again we've got a bottleneck of a misunderstanding, haven't we? About if we don't get it right, if we don't understand what PDA is truly like, i.e. crippling anxiety, then these children are continually going to be failed, not only by the education, but also by these specialist schools who say that they understand, when then clearly there is still a discrepancy. I'm aware of time, Sue. I'm dreadfully sorry to be pushing you. We have got up to, we were thinking about possible solutions. What have you got for us with this then?
Yeah, so I mean, when I've been doing my reading and researching, I have noticed keywords, and the really obvious one to start with is the word of trust, because in my opinion, it is the opposite of anxiety. The anxiety cannot rear its ugly head if there is a trusting relationship. And so to have one key relationship in that young person's school, for example, can make all the difference. I think mentoring as well is key. If you have a young person who is close in age, but perhaps a bit older and has lived experience of anxiety, that they can be buddied up. I think it's all about reframing. Not just as parents, but certainly a multi-layered reframing, because these young people are so complex that you have to have multi-disciplines. You know, social workers, for example, they hear all the time of these clients, these cases where the young person is just not engaging in life. The young person cannot leave the house, perhaps. They cannot go anywhere, never mind school. They are not engaged at home even, you know. And so they, in order for them to have some sort of trusting relationship, they have to see it as a process, a very slow process of really getting to the underlying need for control of that anxiety. You know, what is their safety? You know, that's another key word. How can I encourage the young person to feel safe? What does safe mean for them? You know, it can be different things for different people. How to create the ability to feel okay in this scary world, especially when they're not with their family, because, you know, separation anxiety is a very big factor in this as well. And when the young person is not with their family, not in their home environment, then Yeah, it's really, really important that they know that they have got a place to go, perhaps that is calm, that can give them time, like a timeout card.
Yeah. But it's also understanding that they have an advocate, because that's the bit that's misinformed. Again, separation anxiety means that you are glued to the hip of your child. You can't let go. There is, loads and loads and loads of research done about that. But in this instant, it's very much about hitting home. This is about a young person who is truly advocated in the home environment, needs it replicated in the school environment. If you don't provide that, if you don't understand and address their needs that become unmet, where do they go for that advocacy? Where do they go to feel protected and safe? And this is where it's so important, like you're saying, if they have somebody, a mentor or an advocator, then that would go a long way. But until they do that, it won't work. I'm going to have to push you on. Come on, we're already over time. But what are we going to do then? What's the essence of all of this?
Another key word for me is about connection, relationships and connection. That they are positive, that they are formed over time. That there's a real bond there, where the child's needs are truly understood and seen. And that it's very much child-centered need approach, and a collaborative approach. That's another key word, collaboration, that the child feels that they have a say, that they can contribute, and that what they say and do is important, and it will be valued, because that's probably at the heart of school life, certainly, is that that's to counteract the demand environment, is to feel that they have a say, and that it will not be punished, that it will be equal, and that's of course a big challenge in the mainstream setting. There are schools out there, sadly, they are ones that you have to pay for 9 times out of 10, schools that do encourage all of those things. And what the parents can do is to just think about the language, and it's about changing the way you speak, how you say something, even if it's just about your tone, so that you can
so there's lots of things we can think about doing with changing the language from you to we. Trying not to make it a question, trying not to make it a demand, just thinking your way rather delicately around words that would suggest a collaboration rather than an assertion you must do. But we can always explore that in another session. Sue, you've been a dream as ever. We still have not talked about everything that we had planned as ever, but we can always come back to that. Thank you so much for watching us. We have run over, and I profusely apologise not, because it's incredibly valuable information. If you've enjoyed watching us, I really hope you're going to join us next week. Next week, we have the lovely Zen Ninja join us before she jets off to her exotic holiday. And it's going to be an absolute treat to have her join us as a guest. So we will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.